talking all things theatre and events.
There's people, they're coming, they want to see theatre, they're missing it like we are.
Doing a few years of touring in that sort of circuit, that led me to being a head of lighting.
There is no replacement for the energy in a room where you've got a whole load of people experiencing something together. It's just extraordinary.
The Stage Is Yours podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Stage Is Yours podcast with me, your host Cal Graham, joined as always by producer Dan, and we're talking all things theatre and events. We're joined on the podcast today by Jennie Green, co-founder of touring management company Great Leap Forward. We talk all about Jennie's career and her experiences, along with all things Great Leap Forward. We get into the impact of the last year for our industry and some other theatre chat too. Jennie Green, the stage is yours. Joining us on the day, we've got Jennie Green. How are you, Jennie?
I'm very well, thanks, Cal. How are you doing?
I'm all right. And like I said when we were chatting just before, in a remarkably sunny Edinburgh, which is very nice. And considering it snowed yesterday,
it did. Yes.
I'm a little bit confused as to what's going on with the weather, but it's absolutely grand. So for those of us listening, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about what you do? Because you come from a side of the industry that I don't think anyone from outside of the industry really knows kind of goes on. Yeah,
sure. Of course. Well, Jennie Green, I'm the director of Great Leap Forward, which is a general management and international booking company. We're an agency, which I set up with my business partner, Kate, 14 years ago now, for goodness sake. And I am also, one of our major clients is Matthew Bourne's company, New Adventures, which is how I know you, and lots of other wonderful people in this industry. But we also work for a lot of different other clients. I've general managed for lots of different productions in the past, companies like Zoo Nation. I've worked with loads of different kinds of scale and size of different productions. And my business partner, Kate, looks after all the international booking for a load of different companies, the National Theatre, Bill Kenwright, Celador. We work with lots of different companies, taking loads of shows around the world. So, or at least we did.
We did, yeah, absolutely. In the before times, as they've now kind of been labelled. But yeah, and that's really great. Like I said, it's kind of something that everyone kind of sees these companies doing it, but and tours happening. But there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes that you've just started to touch on there, which is amazing. And I think you've listed off just about every major tour company that, certainly if without really thinking about it, I can go, oh yeah, there's all this one, and kind of list them off that you're already working with, which is amazing. So you said that you've been doing it for 14 years as kind of a general manager. How would you describe a general manager role for a production?
Well, it's interesting. You'd have thought in 14 years I might have worked out how to answer this question, because it is one that people ask quite a lot. Basically, you're kind of organising everything. So it's a bit like being, I guess, the middle of a wheel. So I will be the central point of communication, and we'll sort out all the different strands of a production and bring it all together. So I'll work with the producer to write the budgets for the show, and we'll advise on how best and whether it's financially viable in the first place. We'll work with the creative team and doing deals, and getting the contracts written for everybody. We'll employ everybody, all the cast and creative team, right the way through from the audition process all the way through to actually getting people on board and in the room. I'll work with marketing agencies and consultancies and press as well. Then I work with a production manager to help to oversee the production side of things. So it's a real good mix of everything. It's like a project manager job, I guess. It's in the muggle term.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of the one who's really pulling together the production and making it happen. So delivering the creatives brief and realizing that on stage, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those that it's a job that constantly changes, obviously, with the demands of each production. So it's quite interesting, kind of that kind of you're almost part of that, the umbrella that sits over everyone and kind of make sure that we're all doing what we're supposed to do, and we're all moving in the same direction, really.
Exactly. And so there's a good bit of finance, a good bit of budgeting. There's lots of Excel spreadsheets, which is a marvelous thing. And there's a lot of personnel issues as well. So there's loads of contracting stuff, so a bit of lots of legals. And then you have to be quite abreast of HR policies and what's going on in the world of employment legislation and things, which is quite interesting. And then, but when you've got a big tour on the road, like the ones that we've worked on together, and the bigger numbers where you're talking about really 50-60 people on the road, it's a sort of mid-scale little company that you're running basically for that time. So there comes with that the sort of the softer skill stuff, I suppose, which is how to make people on the road life as good as possible, and to try and make their experience as pleasurable and their working life as pleasurable as possible. Sometimes in reasonably difficult circumstances, but yeah, just the kind of the ongoing investment in people, I guess, and that's the area that I find probably the most satisfying and the most interesting to deal with. And with New Adventures, as a client, I'm lucky enough to have a bit more resource to do that. Some producers are less interested in that than others. For some it's a really big focus, and it's always nice when you've got the opportunity to do that, because you feel like you can genuinely make a difference to people's working lives, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll touch on it a little bit more about the kind of where things are in the current climate of things in a little bit. You touched on there that you started Great Leap Forward 14 years ago. What was it before Great Leap Forward? Before you decided to kind of make your own kind of company and job, if you like?
Yeah, well, I studied English and drama at Birmingham University in about 1945, it feels like now. In fact, it was actually 1990, 93 to 95. And at that stage, it was a joint honours course, practical drama and theoretical drama, along with English literature. And I graduated from there, and then didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went away and bummed around the world for a little bit, and went to Southeast Asia and to Central America, and had a fantastic time. And then came back and did a master's at RADA and King's College in London, so which was called Text and Performance Studies, which I don't think exists anymore. I'm not sure, but I don't think it does. And that was all about how you realise the text in practical terms onto stage. So quite a lot about directing, a bit about producing, I guess, but about design decisions, about directorial decisions. And that was, it was half practical with RADA and half theoretical. And I loved it. It was fantastic, really interesting, good course to do. And then I got to the end of that and realised that that qualified me to do precisely nothing in the world of theatre. So I looked around and realised at that stage that, alas, I did not have enough talent to go into being a director or an actor or performer. I do love it, but the amount of talent I think you have to have, along with the amount of luck that you have to have in terms of getting all of those ducks in a row to get a career, was just not something that I could wait around for. So I needed to earn some money, and I needed to get a job that paid me something and allowed me to eat. So so I went into I did temp at that stage in London. It was actually possible to live in London and only temp, which I think now is pretty economically tricky to do. So I temped in lots of different media jobs, and then finally ended up getting a job a couple of years later in with Clear Channel Entertainment, as it was then, which is now Live Nation, working in their production department. And it was their international production department, where they produced lots of family shows like Tap Dogs, Gumboots, Slava Snow Show. So lots of of shows that were non-language, which were very easy, therefore, to tour internationally. And I started as a receptionist and a production assistant, and it was great fun. I worked for Liz Coops and Gary McQuinn, who were two Australian producers who went on to produce Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and lots of other productions. They'd just been acquired by Clear Channel, and David Ian Productions had just been acquired at the same time. So we all worked together in Grosvenor Street, and I worked my way up from there. I was lucky enough to get some general management responsibilities quite soon, production coordinator, and then working as an associate producer or a general manager. And that's where I first started working on Matthew Bourne's show. I general managed his production of Swan Lake in 2004, which was, well, life-changing for me, obviously, because I've continued that association to this day, which has been fantastic. But I also gained a huge amount of experience. It was all proper commercial show work that. So the bottom line was really important. The shows went toured internationally, so I got to experience what it was like to tour shows overseas. I went to go to a lot of the different productions, which was great. So I got some fantastic travel in, which, as you know, is like a total perk.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was great fun. It was a great time, and there was a huge load of us, and I'm still in contact with lots of people from that time now, which is great. There's a load of people who worked in that office now in loads of different places across the theatre world, so it's lovely. And in fact, Kate, my business partner, and I met there. I started as her assistant, which was a terrible job, very disorganized, but very quickly moved on from that, so it was all right.
I think it's amazing you touch on there the network that you build that just sticks with you the whole way through, regardless of where you all end up. You just kind of build connections and friendships that just keep, no matter where you end up within the world or within the industry, you kind of go, fine. It's like when you just turn up to a random theatre and you bump into someone, you go, I've not seen you for ages. And
exactly.
I had no idea they were even there, to be honest. But it is one of the really nice things of the kind of industry in that sense, that you build that network that stays, regardless of whether you work with them every year or every 5 or 6 years. It seems to be it just works, which is really, really nice. So,
it is. It's great. Yeah,
absolutely. So obviously you then set up Great Leap Forward, and we've already touched on the kind of list of your client base, and that obviously goes on to hugely even bigger than that into massive things like Warhorse, which is on a whole nother scale and seems to just be perennially touring. It doesn't seem to stop, which is amazing. So how is it that you find kind of working with with Great Leap Forward and working with kind of what is seen as the kind of top end of the industry, really?
Well, when Kate and I set out, we very much wanted to form a business that we felt that reflected us and the way that we wanted to work. So we wanted to be able to work with integrity and to be able to work to form good and lasting relationships with our clients and with the venues and with the promoters that we work with. That was really important to us. And we also wanted to try and create a company which would allow us to live life in the way that we wanted to live as well. So both of us wanted to and have subsequently had children. And for us, that was one of the reasons we moved out of London, was because it's very expensive to live in London. I'm from Edinburgh originally. Kate's from Cirencester, but I managed to drag her up to Edinburgh, and she seems to have liked it so far. So far so good. But we moved away from London deliberately so that we could live more cheaply in a city centre, and we work with international and touring companies. So for us, being based in the West End is not important. We don't work in the West End, therefore, and we probably never will as a result of that. But as you know, the touring circuit and the West End circuit are pretty different. And working internationally, obviously it doesn't matter where you're based, you're going to get on a plane to go wherever anyway. So that's worked out quite well. And when we set up, we also wanted to try and maintain a reasonable work-life balance. Obviously that has worked better on some occasions than others. It's worked pretty well in the last year, I can tell you, although perhaps weighted too much towards the life and less to the work. But we live near to my family as well, so that helps with the childcare, which has been fantastic and a very big help. But we've in terms of working with different, with the different clients, I think it's always based on, we always base it on a strong personal relationship with the people that we're working with. And so when you turn things into just being about human beings, it's much less daunting than if you think about it as being an institution. And because I hope that we go the extra mile and we try and really serve our clients as best we can. Both of us are, keen to make sure that those relationships are very smooth. And so we're, just because it's Warhorse versus, I don't know, a small scale show that we're touring, in a way that both of the things require the same amount of effort, they require the same skills, they require the same time commitment. Often a small production actually can end up being more time consuming than a big scale musical or performance. So it kind of the scale and the sort of the name of the company as such doesn't really faze us, I guess, because we're dealing with the individuals and all the individuals that we work with are pretty great people, so it kind of makes it easy.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's one of those, I think a lot of people here necessarily you're working with a certain person and have a kind of an idea that, okay, that must be a kind of very a daunting thing of that, and it might be for the first 5 minutes, and then you generally tend to get to know them and you go, okay, yeah, that's fine, I still do my job the way I do my job regardless of who it is in front of you in that sense. So
yeah, exactly. And there's a few people who still make you a bit starry the first couple of times you meet them. You're like, oh wow, I'm really but that it wears off quite quickly.
Yeah, especially once you get to know them, or you just get them on a kind of completely normal level.
Yes,
where
exactly.
it's like you're in a very ordinary situation with someone and you go, okay, yeah, fine, it's just as it should be in that sense. So obviously we touched on there that it's been a very, very weird, it's over 12 months now,
yes,
13 months as it is now. How has that been for yourself and Great Leap Forward? Has it kind of, obviously in the kind of initial time, I imagine your workload actually went up in the short term.
Yeah, it was a pretty grim time at the beginning. I think that obviously I spent a lot of time on the phone and emailing, trying to cancel everything. So turns out that cancelling things takes just as much time as putting them on in the first place. So, and it's a lot more unpleasant. So yeah, there were a lot of very difficult emails to write and very unpleasant phone calls to have with people. And it was a really difficult time because we were obviously we had a show on the road, as you well know. But we also had a lot of stuff coming up as well. And Great Leap Forward were working in, we had a number of tours which we'd booked for the Far East. So actually our COVID experience started potentially a bit earlier than most people's did, because we started to cancel and have things cancelled from late January, beginning of February. That was in the Far East. And so, yeah, we could see this massive tsunami coming and couldn't really do anything about it. And it was pretty scary because there's not many events that happen where you're, stuff happens all the time in theatre, boats get delayed, shows have to be cancelled, and I've cancelled my fair share of shows. But we're talking about one show in a tour of, however many hundreds of shows. You're not talking about an entire tour. And then another entire tour, and then another one, and another one. And so this year is really taken its toll, I think, on everybody emotionally. with that roller coaster of anxiety, and from our point of view, not knowing, well, firstly, obviously having to let all the people that we were employing at the time down, which was a horrible thing to have to do. But then also worrying about our own livelihoods and income, and then what's going to happen with the future, because once we'd started to cancel things, obviously you're remodeling and financial modeling and this scenario, that scenario, like hundreds and hundreds of them. And then that none of it happened either. So, there's all the wasted energy that goes into all of this, all of the planning for the things that maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. Well, let's do this. And then none of it happens. So you're kind of like constantly up and then down again, and then up and then down again. And it took a while to disengage, I think, mentally from doing that. And I think now I some days are better than others, but I think I've sort of made my peace with the fact now that we can't plan very much into the future. So it's completely affected our entire business model, to be honest. We had 9 people working with us before the pandemic. We unfortunately had to say to let most of them go. We've still got a couple of people on furlough now, but and hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll be joining us back. Some of them at the beginning of May, when things hopefully start to roll. But even that decision is a very difficult one, because you don't know. We can't with any certainty say that those things are actually definitely going to go ahead. Looks like they are, but we don't know, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing that the whole industry has struggled with most, is this kind of, no one can be 100% sure, and the uncertainty around certain things, and everyone kind of goes, well, it's happened on this, so you plan to that, and then it doesn't take an awful lot for that knock-on effect to kind of keep happening. And I did a podcast with Anna Saunders, who was on 9 to 5. Now, she said they reopened for 4 days in December and then had to close again. And I go, I don't know what's actually worse.
Yeah.
Not reopening, or getting to do it for 4 days and then having to close and go through that whole thing again of, well, I'm not there. And I was like, actually, I'm kind of, so I think, and you said it there yourself, that you can only plan so far, and then you have to wait for that or no kind of decision from the powers that be, if it were, as it were, that
and
go ahead or not.
And on the other side, you've got Kate on her side of the business, booking stuff now into 23 and 24. So she's constantly working 18 months to 2 years out, whereas I'm working very much in the here and now. So our two energies have been very different as well. So we've been kind of, one of us has been sort of up and the other's been down. And it's rare that the two of us are at the same place on the Corona coaster at the same time. So it's been a funny old year, but I feel like we've learned a lot out of it. And we've been forced to look at doing some stuff in different directions, because obviously all our income disappeared pretty much overnight. And so it hasn't been all negative by any means. So and I'm sure that's the same with everybody, but it's certainly been an interesting year.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of has gone on longer than any of us ever thought. Certainly from that, it was one of those, it was kind of, it's fine, we'll be done. I think when we first got the email, it was initially just Bradford, and then I think next 2 weeks, and like, we'll be back in 3 weeks. And we were all like, okay, and we kind of all did that. And I did a podcast with Gaz, Sammy and Erin really early on, and I said, that was the first time the 4 of us had properly spoken and been in the same place since Bradford. And we were like, well, if we'd have known that was it, we'd have said like proper goodbyes and stuff.
Totally,
not the kind of, we'll see you in 3 weeks. And I think it was bizarre. And then it was just all the kind of little things of that, of getting personals back and all this kind of stuff. And you chat to everyone, you go, there's just so much other bits that we were like, it was so bizarre and such a weird time that we were all kind of like, oh, okay. And then it was strange. And then we did have the lovely time that yourself and Matt managed to get together for the online private screening of the show and stuff, that we all kind of watched it together. And I think a few of us got onto another Zoom and we're up till stupid o'clock in the morning,
nice.
Chatting and reminiscing and kind of joking about and kind of that. So because we hadn't we all kind of chat and stuff, but we hadn't really kind of seen each other. So it was kind of after what we joked as the Last Supper in Bradford, that we all had. So it was slightly weird. But yes, it was just such an odd time, and it's kind of, I don't want to say dragged on, but
it has. It has
it
dragged
was,
on. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
like,
who'd have thought we'd still be here a year and a bit later. It's extraordinary, and I don't think we're out the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination. So that's what makes it so difficult to plan, is that, you know, the scenarios that you're looking at for opening up again, you know, like, yeah, fine, you know, let's start something in the summer and let's start something in the autumn, whatever. And I still don't think that with any certainty any of us can say that the rest of this year or next year is going to go smoothly. I think it's going to be bumpy roads ahead. Yeah.
And this is where those differences just between types of event and types of shows start to massively change. And I think where I admire the optimism of festivals and Reading and Leeds and everything. I absolutely admire the optimism that you guys are going to get this to happen. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, there's that bit in my head that goes, it's only going to take one setback in terms of that they don't go with what roadmap is set out, and we're kind of, and it doesn't happen. So it's so it's all a little bit weird. So I think there's going to be it's going to be an interesting year, and kind of people working in lots of different ways, and things that like you said are going to stick with us for quite a while into the future, and with how theatre and shows and stuff can happen, probably more so in the theatre nature, because we both know that most theatres aren't designed for socially distanced.
Definitely not, no. But I think I mean, to be fair to them, I feel I've been in a lot of panels and a lot of, you know, steering groups and stuff over the last year. In fact, I feel like I've done quite a lot of that over the last year, which is great. It's been great because it's a really good way of keeping connecting with people, but also sharing of ideas and sharing of solutions of how to progress and how to work as an industry. And we need to be doing that. We need to share our resources, pool our resources at the moment, and that's been great. But that's a lot of that is, you know, talking with the events industry and with classical music and with live events and all of those kind of bodies to try and make sure that we're coming up with a coherent response. And what's come through is the frustration that in an industry like ours, where we're very security conscious, very health and safety, just safety conscious about how to, you know, in terms of making it safe for our employees and the people who work in the industry. We're pretty good at doing all of that stuff, and we're pretty good at doing risk assessments and understanding how things can work, and people who run venues are pretty good at running them. And I think that's what's really frustrating, is that the governments don't perhaps trust that we can do things a bit better than, you know, somebody who's in the park with their mates. You know, there's a structure there, there's a way of doing things, and we probably could make it pretty safe for people if they give us the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I think it has been of that, and we all know kind of it's come up on many podcasts, we turn up to a theatre, certainly on tour, and you trust the people that are there at that know that building, that know that place inside out. If they say that's how they do it, fine,
that's what you do.
That way. That's what you do.
That's right.
It might seem completely odd to us, but that's how you do it. And they, like you said, it, and they know it. So I think that was what it was. A lot of frustration for people, was you could see that. And obviously we did it as much as we could. There were test events at the Palladium, as weird as that looked, and to see the photos and things afterwards. But but hopefully, like I said, things are slowly starting to put in position, and we've had a year to plan it.
Yes.
If there's an industry that can plan something in a year, when you think about the timescales we occasionally get to plan some things, you go, if we've had a year to put these things in place, I'm sure. And unfortunately, like I said, some things might hang around a little bit longer than we probably want them to, but it will be, I'm sure we'll come up with some unique solutions to certain things. That's for sure. That is for sure. Well, we'll jump into kind of the last little part of the podcast, which is 3 questions that we ask everyone who comes onto the podcast. The first one is, if you had a dream show that you could be involved with or work on, what would that be? It may be that you've already done it.
At the moment, my answer is going to be any show, because
love it. Yes.
At the moment, that's the dream. I've worked with some fantastic people, and I've worked with some absolutely brilliant things. The ones that I love to do is actually, it's the magic of seeing something on stage the first time, which you've worked on from the very beginning with the creative team, and that magic is why I do my job. I love it. So all of the productions that I've been with, that I'm watching for the first time, are my dream productions, because they're all fantastic. I love them all at that moment. And that's, so I don't have a dream set of creatives or anything, because I love working with everybody I do work with. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love the kind of notion of that, and I'm sure you get the same, of seeing what initially starts out as, I'm not going to say a doodle on a piece of paper, but at times that can happen in a meeting, that someone goes, well, actually, this is the idea, and just throws something together, and then seeing it kind of through the many stages that happen to then fruition is, I think something that within the industry, we all get a huge amount of satisfaction out of in those moments. So,
and there's nothing like that connection with the audience when the audience sees something for the first time. And we've all talked a lot over the last year about about digital and stuff, but there is no replacement for the energy in a room where you've got a whole load of people experiencing something together. It's just extraordinary, and it's irreplaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second question, what is your go-to post-show snack? That one thing that is just, for whatever reason, you just seem to find that you crave after a show, or that you keep, or you look back on and you go, I've had quite a few of those. It's probably not.
Well, it's probably gin and tonics, to be honest. Although
this is almost, I need to preface this question with, it's a given that we will probably be in the pub after a show.
Yeah, exactly.
An alcoholic drink of some description.
But if you're talking food, then it'll be a fish supper, and it has to be a fish supper from Edinburgh with proper chip sauce.
Yeah, chips and chips. Yes, you try to explain to people what chips and chip sauce is, and if you've never had it, you just don't. You just don't know.
They don't know. No.
But I'm still not 100% sure what it is either myself.
Neither am I. You don't know. It will really
it's fine.
It's
probably absolutely true. And the final part of the podcast, what is the one thing that you know now, that you've learned throughout your career, that you wish you'd figured out much sooner, that probably would have made your life somewhat a bit easier?
I was thinking about the answer to this question earlier when I was thinking about this, and I was chatting to Kate about it, and we were both pretty we're a bit stumped, because we both was just saying that we've had a pretty good run of it, and we've really enjoyed the choices that we've made, and we ended up having a conversation about how we ended up making some of the choices we've made, and we couldn't really answer that question. A lot of them just seemed to be complete youthful just making a decision, and we can't remember why we made them. So, but I think what I would say was is just trust in yourself, and trust in the way that you're doing things, because if it feels right, it probably is right. We've got a lot on instinct with a lot of things, and I think that's generally stood us in good stead. But I might be inclined to just give myself a bit of reassurance about that, and just trust in your convictions and trust in your instincts, and you'll probably be okay. And if you're not, then at least you'll feel good about what you've done.
Very true. Very true. Jenny, this has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and chatting theatre and things.
Thank you very much.
No worries at all. It's
lovely to chat.
Thank you for listening to the Stage Is Yours podcast. Want to know more? Then head over to all of our socials. You can find us at Stage Is Yours Pod, where you can catch a cheeky glimpse at some of our upcoming guests, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. This has been the Stage Is Yours podcast, talking all things theatre and events. Until next time.